Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is the Question Guy podcast. And I'm here with Rhonda Reif. Yes, I always want to
That's
get the
correct.
all
Yes.
right. I always want to get the name right. So this is good. She was here previously. So she was here on the tail end of season two. We're now in season three. I asked her back because she was such a special guest, and she there was more to her story. When we first had a conversation, I allowed her to dissect me in terms of numbers. So she's big in Pythir, Py, help me say it,
Oh, Pythagorean.
Pythagorean number science. And we took a deep dive into who I am, and she hit every nail on the head. And so I'm primarily a number eight, and that could be good or bad depending on who I'm standing next to. But this is not going to be about me this time. Rhonda, this is about you this time. And actually, it's really your backstory. So even long before you got involved in number science, something happened to you. And I want to talk about that today. Are you ready?
Okay. Yep, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Okay. So, first off, maybe just to give a little background in case people didn't catch the first video, please go back and watch it. It's pretty interesting. And the thing is that Keith, you found me because I appeared in this book, Business Life in the Universe, Volume 6. And in there, I had a chapter and I talked about how I had this near death experience as a child. So, originally, you reached out to me to talk about that. So, we're going to maybe focus on that today with that as well. So, um, the thing is that when I was a child, I was about 9 years old. I was in the fourth grade and I had to have my tonsils out. I had a lot of issues and things like that with stress, strep throat, and adenoids and tonsils and infections and stuff all the time. And so we set it up to have my tonsils removed. Now, what they didn't realize at the time, and they didn't discover it until I was actually almost 20 years old, was that I had a rare bleeding disorder. I had von Willebrand's disease, which they never checked. That is a form of mild hemophilia. They never checked that because women weren't supposed to have hemophilia or be carriers. But von Willebrand is a little bit different. It doesn't have the same um, reactions or excessive bleeding as a regular hemophilia would, but it is there and it can be presented in females if both parents are carriers. So they did not know that at the time. Nobody bothered to do that kind of blood work or check, coagulating factors or things like that. So we're talking, this is back over 50 years ago. And the thing was, I always had a lot of nosebleeds too. And so the morning that I came in, the nurse went to give me the hypodermic needle and I was laying on my stomach. I lifted my head to say something and she shoved my face in the pillow and my dad about came unglued. And then I raised my head and she shoved it in again, but there was blood everywhere. So they should have canceled the surgery at that point. Like I was hemorrhaging before I ever went to surgery. And my sister had her tonsils out at the same time. She's about 4.5, 5 years younger than me. So we went to surgery. We come back up and I tell them all day long, I'm tasting blood, tasting blood. Oh, that's normal. Oh, that's normal. Oh, that's normal. It's like, well, I don't know. And so uh, suddenly then in the middle of the night, I had hemorrhaging all day. So then I, vomited all this blood all over everywhere. And it was 4 o'clock in the morning. They had to call in a special blood donor because I have a rare blood, and they had to take me back to surgery. So while I was in surgery, I died. Okay. But I didn't understand all this as a child. I just happened to see that I'm floating above my body. I'm watching all of these personnel working in the medical thing, and they're trying to do all of these things and try to get the bleeding stopped and everything, and I'm just there watching, like, like I'm observing, like watching a TV show. And the next thing I know, I'm walking in this beautiful place. There's a little bridge and there's like just a little tiny water stream and stuff, and I go over the bridge and I'm guided to get there. And when I get there, a little shepherd boy meets me, who then takes me to meet Jesus. Now, before everybody's like, oh yeah, Jesus, I want you to know that I think that the reason everybody's like, oh, that's special, Jesus met you. And I'm like, I don't really feel special because I think that was what my understanding would know, that I was in heaven, because I was 9 years old, raised from a Christian background, and there had been no relatives before me that I would have known to meet me. So I really think that that's why Jesus appeared to me and again, maybe I am special, I don't know, but I think that's why Jesus met me, was because I would understand then and comprehend where I was at.
Can I ask
Did
a
you have a
quick
question?
question?
Sure.
How do you know it's Jesus? I mean, how would you
Well,
know that?
because well, it was based on, it was, well, we communicated telepathically. There is no words.
Rhonda, come back. Rhonda, you froze up. I'm gonna edit this part, but you got to come back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Hello?
you froze up. So
Okay.
I'm gonna edit that part out. How do you know it was
Okay.
Jesus?
So the Jesus, it appeared to me, well, first of all, he told me, like, he told me that, I'm Jesus, don't be afraid. And, then he looked like the Jesus from my storybooks and all of that. And I believe that, that's why I was met with Jesus. If I had been raised in a Buddhist family, I might have been met by the Buddha. I think it's all about how, what your perception is. But he was there to let me know that I was in heaven. And it was so beautiful. And he said to me, come, I want you to feast from the table of wisdom and knowledge. And there was this big, long table, long wooden table. There was nothing on it, nothing physical on it. Yet all the wisdom and information in the universe was on it. And it was just all of this stuff. And it was a smorgasbord. And he was like, take what you want. And I'm just like a kid in a candy store. I'm like, I took it all. Like I wanted to absorb it all. And it was just this incredible energy, love energy and light and just peace. And so I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. And because I love to learn. And there was all of these things I was taking in. And then he tells me I have to go back. And I'm
Go
like,
back
no, I don't
where?
want to go back. And back to Earth.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I don't want to go back to Earth. Like I want to stay here. And there was this big kind of discussion about, no, you have to go back. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go back.
So
And
you're
so,
arguing with
I couldn't
Jesus.
understand it. Yeah, I guess,
I don't,
it's,
I've
I
never
guess one
heard
of those
anybody
things
say
that
that before.
really, oh, I argue a lot with God today too. So, but the thing is that like I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why I had to go back. And, I felt like, are you rejecting me? That was one of those issues of self-worth. Like, why would you not want me to stay? And then, Jesus said, I want to show you. And again, this was all telepathically. This was not words. And he said, look at the people that are down there, praying for you, that are concerned for you. And I want you to see how it would devastate them in order for you to not return. And he said, both your parents love you, but it would definitely kill your father. And then they told me that my father had a very special purpose on earth, and we all have a purpose. I was told we all have a purpose, and that he was supposed to help so many people. And then it was like it said, see all of the people that Jesus says are your dad is going to help. And there was all of these lights. And then it was like, and if you don't return to heaven, look at what happens. And like all of these little lights like started to go out. And it was like, so I very, reluctantly returned back to, my body. And, it's one of those things like you don't necessarily talk about it, especially, 50 some years ago. I'm even like I discussed with you, I'm not, this is just recently that I've started talking about it because I've been encouraged by people that you should share this message. And so I get back and I tell my parents, like I died. And they're like, yeah, how did you know that? Like they had come up and told them that they were working on me, that, that I'd had issues and that they were trying to get me back and stabilized and all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, I saw myself. And so I discussed this with my parents and they were like, they believed me. And then they said, but we don't think you should be telling other people this. And so, it was one of those things that, yeah, it was a way to protect me. And so, although I talked about it within our immediate family, it was not something that I ever really shared publicly. And so, here we are all these years later, and it was one of those things where things would trigger, like you would trigger the memory, because when you come back you don't remember everything that you witnessed and saw. I mean, there was a lot more things that, it's just as you go along you pick up certain things that are triggered, and it triggers that memory, like you just know you're supposed to do it, or you're supposed to be here, or this particular thing or this person. And so I came back and I was in the fourth grade when this happened. And when I was in fifth grade, I had a Sunday school teacher. Now, and I went to a Methodist church, but my parents were very non denominational. My dad was Lutheran, my mom was Presbyterian. I was baptized the Church of Christ. And then we went to the Methodist church that was really close to our farm because when we got older, because it was a long drive to get to the church that we had been going to. So we just started going with the neighbors to the little Methodist church. So we're not talking some offshoot kind of fanatical kind of religion, but the fifth grade teacher tells us that we should sin because if we don't sin, then Jesus has nothing to do. And Jesus wants to forgive us of our sins. So, that's not something that you really should tell a bunch of fifth graders. I'm not even sure you should tell that to a bunch of 50-year-olds. But I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. And so I questioned, stuff, but I was kind of a shy kid. Like I wasn't necessarily going to be, open about a lot of things. So then I go to the sixth grade Sunday school class, who was related to the fifth grade teacher when I'm in sixth grade. And she starts in about how basically only Christians go to heaven and pretty much only Methodist Christians go to heaven. And I'm like, well, what about Jesus? And I said, well, what about Jewish people? Because before I left, the one thing that Jesus kept saying over and over to me was, remember, I'm a Jew. I was born a Jew. I lived a Jew. I died a Jew. And it just kept, saying it over and over again. And he kept saying, follow my teachings, not the preachings. And I was like, I wouldn't make something like that up as a little kid. Like, where would I get that, And there weren't Jewish people in Iowa where I lived. Like, I didn't really even know, I didn't know a Jewish person until, the late 1980s. So, it was one of those things because there just didn't exist here. And so I was like, well, Jews don't go to heaven. And, my whole life I've been raised on all these Bible stories that were, the Hebrews and all of those children's stories and everything. They're all Old Testament. And I didn't realize until years later that those are technically Jewish stories. They're not necessarily New Testament stories. And so I'm like, well, I don't understand it. Then why are we learning about, some of these ancient stories if they're not necessarily New Testament? And so I kind of argued with this Sunday school teacher, and she was very stern with me. And I said, well, so Jewish people don't go to heaven? And she's like, well, no, of course Jewish people don't go to heaven. They killed Jesus and they don't believe in Jesus. And I was like, I was so confused, but something inside me said, just don't argue. Like, don't argue. Like, that just doesn't resonate well. But that was one of those things that triggered that thing with when she started talking about how only certain people go to heaven. That triggered some kind of a memory in me. And then that's when that started going on with this, I'm a Jew. And what I think Jesus was trying to tell me is that, we can't have exclusivity. It isn't that necessarily all Jews go to heaven or all Christians go to heaven or only Christians go to heaven. It was about our earthly view of heaven, of our earthly religious view of heaven is actually different than maybe what our heavenly view is. And I don't feel that it's as exclusive as what some people would be. And then certain Bible scriptures started coming up in like some of the morning services and things. And they talk about how Jesus would say, my father's house has many mansions. And, just starting to put things together with that kind of thing too. Now, I'm not saying that, before everybody has a backlash on me, that I necessarily have the answers. I just know that Jesus made it a point for me to be sure to tell people that he really considered himself Jewish. And so, which makes sense because Christianity didn't exist until after Jesus died. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not supposed to follow his teachings, which is love. And, basically love, like be loving, love God, love your neighbor, all of those kinds of things. And I think that's what he was meaning when he said to me, follow my teachings, not the preachings. And there is a big difference, between what is a dogma or what is a religious rule as opposed to what is a spiritual truth. And so, years later then, so that was my first encounter of questioning, like, well, and I said to the Sunday school teacher, I'm like, well, then why does God have kids born into those families then? Like, 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 well, what's the point? What's the point of all those other people on the planet if none of them are ever going to get to heaven? Like, I was totally confused. I didn't understand it. And it just went against this beautiful, loving place that I had experienced. And again, I didn't share that with that group of people because we just didn't talk about stuff back then.
Right.
So, it's interesting then that fast forward and I start get into the healing field, and I have an MBA and I was a corporate trainer and got injured, and that's what led me on this holistic path. And so, quite different than what I thought it would be. It's, not a CEO of some executive financial corporation or anything like that. Like, I'm doing healing sessions with people and energy sessions. And so I decided to open a school. I'd been teaching classes for years and I opened a school. And I had some haters show up to take the school classes because they were convinced that, things were not what they're supposed to be. And they thought that holistic healing, and they were evangelical Christians, it was evangelical church. What I found out years later, and this, you can't make this stuff up, was that it was a local witches covenant who had really actually was afraid that the teachings that I was teaching people were from like the pure side, and that it was going to put their businesses out of work. And so they didn't want me opening a school. Now, this is true. Like, you just can't make this up. So this church had been harassing this witches covenant. Now, I didn't find this out for years later. Like, I could never understand, why did they come after me? Why did they go after so-and-so who's like actually selling spells and, doing all these things? I'm like, and the class they were so upset with was colors, that I taught this class on colors and how colors affect your health. Now, with an MBA in marketing, I learned that colors definitely do affect your persuasion and your purchase decisions and your packaging and how people, your image, and they can control different impulses and trigger certain things as responses, and also affect your hormonal system and all those things. So it seemed weird to me, like, why is that thing that's got them so upset? And so anyway, so the witches covenant sent somebody in and told them, like, that I was the real person that was going to cause all this trouble. So that's when they started targeting me. Now, when I tell you targeting me, like, this person, this church showed up and picketed outside my building. They blocked the door on my Christmas open house. They came up when I had a Christmas open house, which was citywide, to come in. And I had a school going that the students were given free chair massages, and, you can have refreshments and all this kind of stuff and buy gift certificates. And they came in and they told everybody that they needed to leave, that I was piping music in to brainwash them, and that I was evil and all this kind of stuff. And, the irony of it is that they wouldn't enter any of the rooms. The only room they entered happened to be the room that I didn't have this cute little cross that I bought from some kind of a thing at a local church bazaar that had come from South America that was hand carved. And I'd hung them above the doors in my office, except the one room didn't have it. That's the only room they entered. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of creepy. But I thought I was going to have to call the police. And this just got worse. And I want to tell you, this was back in the late 90s. So this was before everything was password protected, all this kind of stuff. These people changed they canceled my phone. They changed my utilities to be disconnected. They called my insurance company and told them they shouldn't insure me, all the while pretending to be me, of course, but then they would do these complaints. They sued me. They took me to court. This was a thing. They had a 3-year investigation go from the state. The thing is that this guy that was taking the classes was not there legitimately. And of course, I didn't know that. I thought, oh, God's not going to bring me somebody that I'm not supposed to teach. And so, but all the red flags were there, and I should have paid attention. And he was there, like, causing a lot of problems. And so one night he held me hostage in my office after the class, and I didn't show up at the little local Perkins in order to meet everybody for coffee afterwards. And I was there for 3 hours. Now, again, this was before cell phones, we didn't have a lot of that. And he had his foot on the door, but earlier in the night, he had told the class that he was going to throw me out the 3rd floor window because he wanted his money back. And I said, well, you don't get your money back. We're 3/4 of the way done with the class. And, he wanted his money back because he wasn't taking the class because he wanted to go into holistic healing. He was there to cause trouble. And so then finally somebody put it together. And, it was one of those things, like, I wasn't afraid at the time. I just was like telling him, like, you're not going to do this. Get the hell out of here. But I did offer to find him a tutor. Of course, this whole time I didn't know that he was actually,
A mole.
there
Yeah.
as a setup,
Yeah.
right, as a mole. And so finally, a couple of people showed back up and they're knocking on the door. And I said, hey, so and so's got me held in here. I can't get out. Will you call the police? And she said, okay, I'm going to go call the police. And so she says, so and so's downstairs too. So, and I'm intentionally not saying names. So what happens is this guy gets scared, and on his way out, he takes the steps down. Now I'm on the third floor. Halfway down, he punches a hole in the wall and starts a fire. So the building is on fire. And the night before, he had been there, and he had come and taken a bunch of stuff from the supply closet. I did not know, $1,500 worth of stuff. And that particular night, he showed up with a gun, but I didn't know that he had that in the truck either. Now, again, this is stuff long before all these shootings. And it came out later because I'd switched nights with the anatomy teacher who said, so and so's here and he's telling us that, he's going to take these things. And he's like, I'm just going to let him, I said, fine. So then the next night I have a conversation with him. That's when he goes into this thing. He sets the building on fire. So now we got to call the fire department because you can't take the elevator down. The fire's in the stairwell inside the wall, which makes it worse. I want to tell you this building was probably built in the 1800s. So it's not, yeah, it's a really old building. So finally, then the fire department shows up, and I had a very lax landlord, great guy, but really didn't care too much about stuff. He wouldn't get out of bed to come down for the fire department, and they wouldn't leave until there was somebody that would stay and sign off. So they wouldn't let me leave. And I'm calling him and I'm like, you've got to come down here. Like, so now I'm there till like 4 a.m. because this all started around 9 o'clock at night. And, I told my friends, I'm like, well, I guess we're not going to meet for coffee tonight. But, and it was one of those things that you don't realize until afterwards, like you have all this strength going into it. But so when I tell you that I have been tormented and harassed by evangelical Christians, I really mean it. And then I took all of this to law enforcement, which then said, you do realize that this person's wife works in law enforcement in another county. And I said, well, no, but that shouldn't matter. And they said, yeah, you should really think long and hard before you press charges. So of course I'm like, okay, well, it's over. He's done. He's out of school. Like it's all documented, all this kind of stuff. But then he continued to do things like from sort of this backdoor kind of way. And the message that, that they kept saying, that people kept saying was like, well, that their church was like that because they wanted to summon me before their elders and all this. And they said, this is against God. Like the things that you're doing, these healings are against God. And I was like, no, I know that these are true. Like I've helped people that have been, chronic pain or whatever it is, that through doing some of these things like essential oils or massage or Reiki or those kinds of things, that they have had improvement. Now, I don't believe the gift comes from me. I think it comes through me. I want to make that clear. But I began to question. It was another one of those aha moments that it was like, oh my gosh, like I've been raised in a Christian environment my whole life. And these people are saying that I'm not following God. And I need to find out, where do I stand? Because I know these things are true and I know they're coming from a holy place. And so I questioned that, and it sent me on this long excursion. And one day I had an idea that was like, it just popped into my head, and it said, you have to talk to a rabbi. Like, okay, like, when you get one of those weird thoughts that that it's not like something that you could have made up, or that you're questioning, like, oh, did I just have that? Is that just my brain talking to me? Like, I'm telling you, like, I live in rural Midwest Iowa, small town. There's, years ago, 100 years ago, there was a synagogue here, but there's no synagogue here. And there are really very few Jewish people. Like I told you, it was 1985 or 86 before I'd even met a Jewish person that was living in Chicago. And so, it was like, I'm like, oh my God, like, well, where am I? But it was stronger. And the voice just kept getting stronger. Like, you have to talk to a rabbi. And I'm like, okay. So I called my one friend who I knew, her daughter took classes with another person's daughter who they were Jewish but didn't live around here, and that they would travel a lot to do like these sporting events. So she talked to her daughter, who talked to that daughter, who talked to her dad. He talked to his mother, who talked to her rabbi, who then talked to some other rabbi who found somebody in Des Moines. And this rabbi from Des Moines calls me, which is like 3.5, 4 hours away. from where I live, but it was not a direct route. It wasn't just, like look in the yellow pages. And so this rabbi's like, well, I'm not really sure, but I know I'm supposed to call you. And so we start talking, and I'm telling him, like, I'm asking him, I said, well, I need to know, like, for whatever reason, I've been told this voice just keeps telling me to talk to a rabbi. And so I'm hoping you can give me some information. I don't even know why I want to talk to you. And so we got to talking, and he said to me, I said, they're telling me that this is against the Bible, that this is against God, this is against Jesus. I said, but I don't believe that. And I'm just questioning it. And he says to me, he says, the thing that Christians forget is Jesus was a Jew. So there's that other like aha thing again, like there's a trigger, like, okay, I'm on this right path. Like there's that breadcrumb because I remembered Jesus telling me, remember, I was a Jew. And so then he started sharing with me, and this was before, Madonna was into the Kabbalah, or all the celebrities were into the Kabbalah. I'd never even heard of the Kabbalah. And he says to me, he says, do you know, like, tell me some of the things that you do, and essential oils and this and that, and, astrology and numbers. And he's like, numbers? You do numbers? And I'm like, well, yeah, I believe that numbers speak to us. And he says, well, that's very ancient Hebrew as well. And as the more I talked, he said, you are talking about all of these spiritual truths, all of this ancient wisdom and knowledge that's in the Kabbalah. And he said the Kabbalah predates the Old Testament. He said it was written to explain the Zohar, of which, to give you some idea, the three wise men, the Magi that visited Jesus, were from, they followed the Zohar. And it's all of these ancient secret truths about different kinds of healing, things that we can do within ourselves that aren't necessarily limited to what we've been taught, that first thing a mother does when a kid hurts their elbow is they kiss it or they touch it or whatever. Well, those are all things we can do, and Jesus was trying to tell us that the least among you can do the things I do. And so so it was really helpful. But he said to me, he says, well, how do you know these things? Have you read and I'm like, well, no. And I was kind of careful. I didn't want to go into that. I just said, I'd had a near death experience, and that Jesus met me and was very clear about how he was a Jew. And he says, well, do you realize that all of the things that you are talking about not only are in the Kabbalah, but these are things that the sect of Jews that Jesus's mother Mary belonged to, the Essenes, practiced and studied. And then there's an overlap. If you go back into history, there's an overlap between the Pythagorean school and what was taught and with the Essenes. And so there's like this sort of overlap with things that were going on. And he explained to me that Jesus was put into hiding around the age of 11 when he was found talking to the people in the temple about all of these spiritual truths that only men over the age of 35 who are rabbis actually have access to this. It used to be that's how the Kabbalah was sort of guarded. And he said, so they knew when Jesus was this child between 9 and 11 that there's just no way that he would know these spiritual truths. So that's when Mary took and put him into hiding, and he went to live with the Essenes. And again, you can research this yourself, but this is based on what the rabbi was sharing with me. And I have found research out there to find it. This isn't necessarily my thesis that I did, but the thing is that gave me so much peace that it was like, not that I thought that I was evil, but I didn't want to be doing something that was perceived as evil or against God or, whatever. And so the thing is that, but he did say the one thing that the Bible talks about is witchcraft. Like, you don't want to be doing witchcraft like that. So then years later, when I find out that the witches were the ones who turned me in and started this whole gamut, but it was a blessing because it took me sort of on like a walkabout kind of thing, not literally, but one of those things where I, actually went around full circle, did this whole thing, and it brought me back closer to, spirituality, not religion, but spirituality, than if I had just, let it go or believed what they told me, like, oh, you can't be doing healing stuff and this doesn't work to rub this spot on your foot, those kinds of things. So it's just very profound to me. The rabbi was actually one of those puzzle pieces that I really, really needed. It brought it into play. It helped me to sort of make sense and make peace of that these gifts were from that table of wisdom and knowledge, that they were not something that I had just made up. And then I started getting books, like a friend would give me, like I would share this with a couple people. And recently, like during the pandemic, and she sent me this book. She goes, I found this book on healing techniques by the Essenes. And she goes, it means nothing to me, but I thought you might like it. And I looked through it, and there were all of these different techniques that I've been doing for 30 years that no one ever taught me. And so I definitely feel like, that there were some things that happened on the other side. Again, that we're not going to know all of the things that we learned and stuff. But these things of just knowing, that I just know, that come very easily to me, that, I used to think that it was because I was reincarnated, like I must have done it in a past life. And maybe I did that too, which, by the way, reincarnation, astrology, numbers, essential oils, healing, energy healing, all of those things were things that the Essenes actually followed and believed. So that gave me a lot of peace. And so I think that that's, Jesus told me that, because that, remember that I'm a Jew, that was going to help me later on. I think that's what was helping me with this coming to peace with that. And I think it kind of tells us a message. And the other thing I did not know was that Jewish belief is, and again, I don't know all sects because I was just talking to this one particular rabbi, but and he didn't seem like he was a strong Orthodox one. I don't know, but and we had a couple of conversations. We continued that, was that the Jewish people do not believe that you need to convert people. They believe that everyone goes to heaven, that there is no, with this, and everybody has their own path to heaven, and that everybody has come here with their own path and purpose in order to find whatever's going on. So they don't believe that they need to convert or recruit or whatever, that we sort of have this sort of one-on-one kind of walk with God. Now, again, this is what the rabbi shared with me. I've never even set foot inside a synagogue. I don't know anything about, the religion itself. These were just things that was shared with me, and it did give me a lot of peace. But again, you get a lot of blowback from people too, that a lot of people aren't necessarily open to hearing that that there might be, many mansions might mean, different heavens for different religions. I don't know. I don't have all of the answers or all of the secrets, but these spiritual truths are out there. And if we look for them, they're there. And numbers are definitely one of the ways that I communicate. Every time I've tried to leave the holistic field and go get a regular job or get something that has a more consistent income, it's like it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. And there's something that happens that keeps me, doing this kind of path. So I don't know why all of a sudden I'm supposed to be sharing this particular message and story with people, because for years I didn't even tell people that I was being harassed by this local fundamentalist church, because I was like embarrassed and frightened. And I mean, it got to where I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do anything. Like, they found out where I lived. They interviewed my neighbors. And again, this was before people took a lot of this stuff kind of seriously. And so it did that, and it kind of made me stop doing that. And every time I've kind of started to come out of the shell and start talking about different things, then it seems like it's sort of that whack-a-mole where I kind of go back in. So for whatever reason, I'm putting this out there now and talking more about it and stuff, but I definitely feel like that table of wisdom and knowledge is where I've learned so many of these gifts that I have. So do you have any input, feedback, questions, or?
Well, wait a second. You just literally talked for 30 minutes straight, and now you're asking me for input?
Well, I was waiting for, like, I tried to read your face to see if you were going to say something.
Well,
You were
no,
you were
because
sitting so still.
you weren't
So
stopping. You were not
okay,
stopping, which is great.
okay,
So one, I applaud your courage and your bravery for, sharing this information. Um, Two, there would be too many things for me to ask you, and I would not, we would go all over the place. And so I don't want to ask you them on record. I'll probably after the call, after the recording.
okay.
But the one thing that's, well, the things that really stick in my mind are the questions would be about you. Have you ever tried to talk to Jesus again? I mean, is that something that you've tried to do? Because that would seem to be something that I think people would want to do if they had the opportunity to talk the first one time.
Yeah, I I have conversations all the time.
With
Like
with
I'll
with,
ask,
with
well, I mean, I'm
Jesus?
not saying it's necessarily interactive, but there'll be things that I will ask.
Okay.
And then what I've learned is that it it may come just as a knowing. It may come because again, this was all telepathic. It may come as a sign. Like we've shared, like one of the things is that I definitely the numbers definitely speak to me.
Right.
So I definitely can do that. It could be like I'll be asking Jesus a question or my guides or whoever or God, and a certain song will come on the radio and that song will have like the answer to it. So that's one of the things is that I definitely believe that there's this interaction. I believe that there's sort of like this collective thing, that the thing with the purpose is that everybody has a purpose. That was one of the things that I learned. Everybody has a purpose or a mission or a goal or an assignment, whatever you want to call it, or lessons or both. And they're interwoven. It isn't just me coming here and I'm supposed to invent, the airplane. It's about how am I supposed to come here and then how am I going to interact with other people so that we can all collectively interact and reach our purposes. So it's all interactive. Just like with me, if I hadn't returned in order to do whatever my purpose is, and again, who knows, that's still an evolving question for all of us on the planet, is all the people that my dad wouldn't have been able to fulfill his purpose, and those people then wouldn't have had their whatever it was, and then they couldn't have gone out and done theirs. So that was definitely one of the sort of the lessons. The first lesson was love, absolutely love. Everything is love, everything is about love. And when you think about it, the two messages from Jesus are about love. So yeah, so I think that there's many ways that you can get that. Sometimes, and again, everything that happened in heaven was telepathic. Like it was just something that just happened. So sometimes when, like I'll be saying like, Jesus, why is this happening? And then all of a sudden, poof, just a knowingness will come into my head. I think that was that communication. But there is a funny story I'll share with you, because definitely I think that God, Jesus, whatever, must have a sense of humor, because a while back there was some issues that I was having, with the pandemic and the finances and all those kinds of things. And it was just like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get, how am I going to get some income? I got to get some income. I've got to, do whatever. And my friend was just like, well, can you sell this? Can you do that? And so, this was back when restaurants weren't seeing people, but you could go through the drive-through and you get something everybody's eating in the parking lot. So I'm sitting in the parking lot, I'm eating my sandwich, and I'm just like, okay, Jesus, what am I going to do? Like, I have to trust, like, income's going to come from somewhere. And that, what can you do? And so this guy knocks on my window and he says, hey, do you want to sell your car? And I'm like, my car? Now, keep in mind, it's a 2001 Toyota, okay? It's in good shape, but it's a 2001 Toyota. So
It's
it's
20
like,
years
this,
old.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's 20
Yeah.
years old. And again, I live in a very white state, white community. And so this guy was Hispanic. So it seemed a little strange. Like, he kind of was out of place, is what I want to say, like, because we don't have a large minority population where I live.
Right.
And so I'm like, why do you want to buy my car? And he said, well, I need a car like this. And I'm like, well, where's your car? And I look over and he's got this beautiful, like $50,000 like SUV kind of thing. Like it's beautiful. And his family was in there. They had their door open and they were eating. And he goes, I just need something to get back and forth to work. And I need something with good gas mileage. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. So at this point, I'm like thinking, okay, this is kind of weird. Like, and so I said, you know what? He goes, well, I really want to buy your car. And I said, well, it's not for sale because then I would have nothing to drive. And he says, well, let me give you my number. I said, okay, you give me your number. And if I change my mind, I'll let you know. Because he'd asked me, I'd ask him, like, where do you live? And he didn't even live in Iowa. And so I didn't even open the paper. I stuck it in the visor and I got home. And I'm like, okay, this is just too weird. So I pull the guy's number out because I thought I'm going to look at the area code and see if he really was, I pull it out. Now, what do you think that guy's name was?
His
He's
name?
Hispanic. His name.
How's
He was
Jesus?
Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus. And I'm like, oh my God, Jesus just offered to buy my car. Like, I'm like, oh my God. So, you have to, and I didn't sell it. Okay. Because my friend, who is very evangelical, she took it to mean that I should sell the car. And I took it as a message. Hey, I got your back. I'm listening, like something's gonna work out, that kind of thing. But so I tell that story, it's like, yeah, Jesus offered to buy my car. And so right after I just asked Jesus, like, please, Jesus, like, what am I gonna do for money? Now the car ended up getting vandalized later on, like a couple years later. And so I should have sold it probably to Jesus. But the point is that, was that Jesus talking to me? Is that kind of, does that answer your question? Like one of the
It
things I
has it
learned,
has to answer my question because
we're
um
out of time.
no, because I
Oh,
want to, because you just don't meet Jesus and then not talk to him again. You just that doesn't seem logical. So there, but there, we have to come back. I this call, yeah, we got to come back. I'm sorry, because you're just the greatest. You're just the greatest person to talk to. Um, because you earlier you mentioned, well, you mentioned a whole bunch of stuff, and now that it's on record, I could go back and review it and just list out all the questions that we got to talk. But you, and the time that you said that you were being like harassed, you said that the Christian church was harassing you and witches, or were they the same?
no, 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 no. It was both. It was
Okay, they
both.
were
And as
both.
a matter
Okay.
of fact, yeah, as a matter of fact, then
But
that
we
witches.
can't dig into it right now. But I need to know, how did it stop? Like, how did the harassment? When did the harassment stop?
You know, I don't know that it ever really has.
Oh, okay.
There's still been issues with witches in the place. That's a whole nother story. There has been issues that I worry that sometimes when I meet somebody and I don't get that deal, or I don't get whatever, that, were they a member of that church? Is that why that happened? Did this contract expire because of that particular thing? Like, you just don't know.
Right.
What I will say is it took a lot of prayer, and I was ready to close the school after the first year, but then I stayed open because I'm like, well, I don't want to close because I think that, you know, I closed because of them.
Right.
But that was a year that I had men sign up to meet women, women sign up to meet men, and then I had women sign up to meet other women, which none of that ever occurred to me, that people would come to learn how to do holistic stuff as a dating pool. But again, I approached it from a different point of view. So
Well, Rhonda, I so appreciated this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me again. And honestly, I'm going to bring you back if that's okay with you.
sure, sure.
This has been another edition of the Question Guy podcast. We'll see you next time. Take care.